Hey everyone, welcome back to Papa's Workshop. In today's video, I want to be able to get back to the FoxAlien Vasto, and I want to add an auxiliary wasteboard. This wasteboard that's on here is really nice, and I don't want to tear it up doing the different projects. What I plan on doing is using a piece of 3/4 inch white melamine and be able to secure it with these different screws. Now this is the M6 screw, and I'll be able to use the nut that will go right into this T-track. I think that will hold it perfect. I think that will give me a real good level work area to be able to do the carvings. My plan is to be able to go through a series of the V-Carve Pro doing the inlays, and I think that is going to be an awful lot of fun. And I hope that you will stick with me and go through this series of videos with me. Now this piece of white melamine is nothing more than just a piece of scrap that I had in the scrap bin, and it ended up being just about the right size. Having a wasteboard like this makes it where you don't have to worry about the original one and tearing it up. And when it does finally get bad, you just unscrew it and swap it out for a brand new one, and you're ready to go again. One of the things that's very important to point out is I don't need the wasteboard to cover the entire surface, because when I home the machine, the XY0 position is right there. I don't need a wasteboard coming out into this area. Likewise, on the back of the machine, I really don't need to go any further than approximately here. This is as far back as the machine will go, so all of this area is area that you cannot carve in. So I'll make my wasteboard a little bit larger, but not a whole lot more, because that's going to be the work area that I have to be able to do all of my cutting, carving, graving, everything right there in that area. So I'm going to grab the tape measure and I'm going to measure this and just see what size I need. And measuring on the y-axis looks like it's going to be around 19-20 inches, somewhere in that vicinity. And then if I measure along the x-axis, it's going to be, well, 19 inches would work as well. So basically, if I have a piece of the white melamine that is 19 by 19, that would work. If it's a little bit longer on the y-axis, that would work too. The scrap that I'm looking for is a piece that I had left over from when I tore apart one of the other fixtures in the shop, and I had just stored it for a number of years. I have an old piece of this melamine that I think I can use, and this is 21.5 by 23.5, so that's going to be plenty of material. Now I have a lot of screw holes in here all the way around. I can take this over to the table saw and cut this off, and I can also clean up this edge, because this edge is beat up quite a bit also. And then I'll wash this down, try to make it white again, and I'll have a real good auxiliary wasteboard. Now, one of the old habits that I have is I really try to save as much as I can, and this is a good example. This was a piece of an old part of the dust collection that I had, and I had replaced it. I tore apart the old one and stored these little scrap pieces. The only downfall to this is there's a lot of screw holes and different amount of cleanup that I need, and hopefully I'll still have enough of the material in the middle after I get rid of all these holes that it'll work. So I just set it up on the table saw and went ahead and just started cutting off those first holes, and that was taken off about 3/4 inch off of the size of this, and that actually was going to work out pretty well. At this point, with a couple of the sides cut and the holes are gone, I'm just going to extend this out to 19 inches, and I'm going to make the first cut for the x-axis for that 19 inches. Now my hope is to be able to have the x-axis at the 19 inches, and then on the y-axis actually make it a little bit longer. Well, that was the plan anyway, but after cutting the 19-inch piece, I flipped it over and noticed I've got some more holes in there that I didn't see, and they hadn't been drilled all the way through. So at this point, best laid plans of mice and men, I'm going to have to cut this down again to be able to get rid of all of those screw holes. So it's back to the same thing again, and I'm going to cut it down, and bottom line is it turned out where this is pretty much a square piece of melamine that's going to be 19 by 19. And that still will work just fine. That will take care of plenty of room for the screws to go in and be out of the work area, and at the same time it'll take care of all the work area that I have to be able to put the projects onto the surface of the CNC machine. Well, that completes getting all the cuts made and getting this board down to size. It's not exactly what I was hoping for, but it's going to work just fine. So it ended up being a nice square piece, 19 by 19. At this point, it's time to go ahead and grab the Windex and let's get all of this dirt off of here, because this is years of dirt that's not only from the storage, but it's also when this piece actually served as the cabinet for the dust collection. So it's time to get this cleaned up and make it white again, because even though it doesn't show in the camera, there's a lot of dirt that's on this melamine. But with a little bit of Windex and a paper towel, it cleaned up really nice. And the good thing about it is, it turned white again. It looks as good as it did the day that I bought it some years ago. And of course, I got to flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. And then let's take it back over to the CNC machines and measure to be able to get the alignment to be able to drill the holes. I'm taking the auxiliary wasteboard, putting it down onto the CNC machine, and I want to get it centered left and right on this x-axis. And by carefully measuring, I've got it perfect. Now I can just align the holes. To do that, I'm going to take a pencil and measure right between the center of this T-track, and I'm going to transfer that over to the top of the wasteboard. Now this is just line of sight, and I actually think we can do better. So let me grab a square, and I'm going to do the same thing again, and this time I'll transfer this measurement using the square. So again, I'm going to line up with the center of this T-track on both sides, and that's looking pretty good. And then I'll go ahead and do the same thing. I'll transfer that information over to the surface, and let's see how my guesstimate did as compared to a more accurate method. And that actually looks pretty good. I think that will work just fine. I'm going to transfer this information now to the rear and then mark the y-axis the same exact way so I have a center point to be able to drill these holes. And then I'll just take it over to the drill press and drill all the holes. Now, of course, to be able to maintain the accuracy, I'll drill a pilot hole first and then the hole to accommodate the M6, which will be a 1/4 inch drill bit. And then I'm also going to countersink this. I want the head of this screw to be below the surface. So it's a little bit of a step-by-step operation, but it's really very straightforward and very simple to be able to do. Now, I didn't film this because it's just drilling holes, but you can see the 1/4 inch hole in the center, followed by the countersink hole, which is about a 1/2 inch, so that the head of the screw can be sunken into this material below the surface. The simplest way to put these screws on is put the screw through the hole and then go ahead and put the T-nut on. Screw it into position and do that on all 4 of them. With all 4 in place, then it's just a matter of sliding the board into these slots and that T-nut will be in position. Now, these T-nuts that I'm using are actually being recycled. These are the hold-down clamps that came with the CNC machine, and I'm not going to be using those. So I'm just simply taking these T-nuts off, and I'll use those with the 16 millimeter M6 screw, and that will be the perfect length to be able to go into the T-track on this CNC machine. And there you go. All 4 of the T-nuts are in place, and I can simply slide this board now back and forth along this T-track, and I'm ready to be able to square it, align it, and tighten it up. I want this auxiliary wasteboard just as perfectly square as I possibly can get it. I already have the reference lines on the original work table. I just want to make sure that it's as square as I can possibly get it. Now, it's not 100% required to have this square, but I can promise you there will be projects that I want to be able to square to this table. And having this auxiliary wasteboard perfectly square and aligned will make a huge difference. So it's well worth the time to get it accurate at this point. So yes, I check it and double check it, and then I'll check it one more time just to make sure. And with everything exactly in place, then I'll just tighten these screws down and it will be perfectly aligned, and it will make doing projects later on so much easier to be able to do. I want to remind everybody that these screws are actually below the surface. That was the reason to countersink them. To me, it's very important to be able to do that just so that the material, the projects, and the router is out of the way. But quite frankly, this is outside of the work area, so I really don't have to worry about this. At this point, everything is square, everything is tight, the auxiliary wasteboard is completed. Just to be able to show you and make sure that you understand exactly what's happening, I'm going to go ahead and home this machine and bring it right down to the machine XY0. Now that the auxiliary wasteboard is in position and square, I went ahead and tightened down these screws, and these screws are below the surface. Now these are still out of range as far as the work area, and I'll show you exactly where the machine 0 position is located. After homing the machine, I marked this X right at this position. That is the machine XY0 position. And you can see it's just behind this screw. So that screw will never be a problem or an issue. On the other side, this screw is located in exactly the same position along the X-axis. So again, it will not interfere with the operation at all. Over the years, you have seen me use many different methods to be able to hold down the different projects, and this is no different. And you've also seen the wasteboards that I have put down and different designs. I think this is going to prove to be a very worthwhile upgrade to this CNC machine. I can still use the glue and tape method as well as screws to hold the projects down. Now you notice in this video, I'm using the open build sender to be able to control the machine. And this is a very, very effective tool that I have been using more and more. Many of you know that I use oftentimes the universal G-code sender for a lot of the different projects, but quite frankly, I do mix it up and I use the open build software quite a bit to control the CNC machine. In the upcoming videos where I'm using the FoxAlien Vasto CNC machine to do the project, I still may mix it up a little bit and use the universal G-code sender as well as the open builds. I think it's a good idea to be able to show you both so that you can choose which one that you want to use. But from the standpoint of this CNC machine, this is a very solid, well-built machine that I absolutely love. And I can't wait to start doing some projects on this one just for you guys. Thank you very much for watching the video today. Having this auxiliary wasteboard, I think, is a tremendous asset because it will protect that original wasteboard on the CNC machine that I really don't want to get damaged. I wish I had done that on the other CNC machine that I have in the shop. In the next few videos, I'll be upgrading these CNC machines so I can do larger projects with the same type of auxiliary wasteboard. So until next time, I look forward to seeing each and every one of you in the future videos. So bye-bye now.